Welcome, everybody. I'm Marc David, founder of the Institute for the Psychology of Eating. We're in the Psychology of Eating podcast, and I am interviewing Donna Gates today on the topic of cravings and carbohydrates and probably a lot more. Welcome, Donna.
Well, Marc, it's been a long time since we talked, but I'm so glad we connected because you've always been somebody that's, from the first time I ever talked to you, you really impressed me with your wisdom and great heart. So I was really glad we became friends, and it's really nice to connect again.
Well, I am honored. Thank you for those kind words. And let me brag about you for a moment, and then we'll jump in. So for those of you who might not be aware of Donna's work, Donna, to me, is one of the world's most respected authorities in the fields of digestive health, diet, nutrition, best-selling author of the Body Ecology Diet and the Body Ecology Guide to Growing Younger. So Donna has been at this a long time. By the way, the Body Ecology Diet, that is a classic book that was really, honestly, a game changer in the nutrition field in so many ways. Donna helped introduce stevia into the U.S. market. She's pioneered and championed foods like kefir and coconut oil, and really helped put the gut microbiome into the conversation. As far as I can remember, you were the first person who really started talking about that, started talking about fermented foods, and the word pioneer gets tossed around quite a bit. And what I want to say is you to me, you truly deserve the title. You know, both of us, we meet a lot of people in the health space, and, you know, a lot of the experts. And I always know that whatever you're up to, whatever you're talking about, whatever you're thinking about, that's where things are going to be going. So you've been ahead of the curve since day one, and I've been a fanboy since I read your first book, and glad we get to be colleagues, glad we get to do this. So I'm really happy you're here.
Ditto. Well, thank you for that great introduction. I hope I live up to it
right?
today.
The pressure's on.
Yes.
So these days, you know, carbohydrates tend to have a bad name all of a sudden. You say carbs, and it's almost like people are hearing, you know, don't eat the apple. It's sort of one of the bad foods for a lot of people, depending on what you're reading and who you're reading. And at the same time, a lot of us are dealing with cravings of all kinds, and oftentimes, particularly a carbohydrate kind of food. So what's your thinking these days about the connection between cravings, carbohydrates?
Well, I've been seeing trends come and go for a really long time. I mean, I've been doing this so long that back in the early days, people adamantly, including medical people, believed that you had to have sugar. You had to have sugar, you wouldn't have energy. And you go to the doctor and you'd say, do you think my broken out skin or whatever is related to diet? Oh, absolutely not. You can eat whatever you want. So we've come a very long way, completely over to the other side. But yeah, carbs have been thrown into this camp where they're bad, and a lot of people feel better without them in their diet. But for people that don't know this, people used to throw vegetables in as a carb. Some of them are starchier, like sweet potatoes, for example, are starchy. So that's a starchy vegetable. So yes, it has more carbs in it. But you've got a category of vegetables like broccoli and cabbage and asparagus and all the cruciferous vegetables. They're not starchy at all. So we have to take them out of that conversation. And then now you're left with the really bad carbs that are basically, you can throw them all into the flour category. Whether they're gluten-free or not, or have gluten in them, they're flour. And the digestive tract doesn't like flour. It's gummy. If you've ever made paper mache things in grammar school, you know, you mix flour and water together and then you can make something with it. Well, that's what you're doing every time you eat a flour product, like a cookie or bread. Chew it up. That's how it's going through your digestive tract. And then so there's the complex carbs, like whole oats or rice. There's a lot of different kinds of rice. Like there's red rice, black rice. They have a lot of nutrients in them. And then there's a refined white rice that's metabolized really quickly. So even that's a big category. But here's what I know about carbs. First of all, they've got to be prepared properly. And if they are, they become a really good food. So I'm a blood type A, and over the years I've always have asked people. So I started going with Peter Diadema's father. I was used to be super sick. I spent my whole beginning of my life trying to find answers. And one of the places I went to was Dr. James Diadema, who was Peter's father. And he had already written and was working with people on blood type. And I'm an A. So from that time on, which was like 45 years ago, I would always ask anybody, what's your blood type? So I have gathered lots of information. When I started working with all these families whose kids had autism, 8 out of 10 of them are blood type A. It's rare to see a B, and it's even pretty rare to see O's. And over and over again, they were blood type A. So I mentioned that to some other doctors that work with kids with autism back in those days. They checked their files and sure enough, completely agreed with me. So I'm into different blood types. I know that some people debunk the whole thing, but there's great information in the blood types. And so for example, A's really do well having greens in their diets because they're calming. That's what A's really need. They tend to be easily stressed. And because of that, their cortisol goes up. They don't digest protein, believe it or not. So there's a lot of things going on in an A's body that, and they don't make enough hydrochloric acid anyway, so they don't really digest animal protein all that well. So there's ways to prepare your food that makes all the difference in the world. Also, one of the criticisms of grains is, so the paleo people that believe we should go back to our ancient way of eating and hunter-gather, kill things and gather some stuff. The gathering that they did was more like quinoa, by the way. So they did eat those kind of foods, but around 10,000 years ago, plus or minus a few thousand years, people started farming, which is a real smart move because it was very stressful hunting and gathering as more people came on the earth. There wasn't so much to hunt or gather. So they settled down, they started farming. And so now they had milk, and maybe they didn't have milk before, and then they grew, grains and they ate those. But they were better quality than we have today. But the most important thing is you've always got to consider the microbes in your gut. So maybe before we started doing agricultural farming and everything, we would have had completely different bacteria in our gut. Now you're settling down and you're starting to eat grains. Well, within one generation, their genes even changed, but way so that they could digest milk and grains and things like that. But even before that, the trillions of microbes who also each one have their own set of genes, they quickly change. If you change your diet, they start changing immediately. Not just changing, they actually literally change their genes to be able to begin to digest your new food. Mm-hmm. And I never hear anyone saying that. And I'm thinking, how can you miss something so very, very important? But I will say there's a clue there, because let's say you are a paleo person. You're finding you can't sleep and you're all stressed out and snapping at people and everything, but you feel like maybe you should try going back to some healthy, complex carbs. And maybe oats are really, really good for you. Well, you don't eat oatmeal because that's like processed, but also they just take those oats and slice them up and stick them in a box, but they're dirty. Mm-hmm. So I like for people to buy the whole grain, wash it really well, soak it for at least 8 hours or longer and get that phytic acid off, and then you can start to cook it. Well, so the preparation of the grain is really important. And a lot of times nuts and seeds, and you go to the store and you buy them and eat them right out of the package. They have phytic acid, which makes it almost impossible to digest them. And then they also bind up your minerals. So we need to get rid of that phytic acid. So that's one important step. But they really need long time cooking. So back in the day, long ago, meal preparation had to be very simple, obviously. So they'd have this open fire in one big pot, and they put the grains in there with anything, root vegetables they were able to store through the winter, anything that they could find, Herbs particularly were available and important. It could be dried. And of course, then they began to do more putting up food, but particularly fermentation. So fermentation really isn't a man-made, it's not something man came up with. Nature's already fermenting things, but what man noticed was nature ferments things. And so then people actually began to ferment vegetables. And like cabbage, for example, is classically fermented all over the world. And there's kind of this story, I don't know if there's any truth to it or not, but supposedly the reason people survived the flooding of the earth 6,000 years ago, which scientists say did happen, the Bible says it was a big flooding and only Noah's family survived, but people did survive, little pockets of people all over, and every single one of those places has their own different kind of fermented food that they would have been able to stay alive on. So that's really important because these have a long shelf life. They don't have to be refrigerated, but they are absolutely loaded, especially the fermented vegetables, especially you make them a certain way. They're loaded with beneficial bacteria. And what do they eat? When you eat them, eat some with your grain, porridge, whatever. They're going to eat that. That's a great fiber for them. They make what are called short-chain fatty acids, which give fuel to the gut lining. It's where our energy comes from down there, protects the gut lining and all. And so it's like a perfect setup. So when people do go just paleo and now they want to decide to switch over, they're not going to be able to just today eat paleo, tomorrow eat that new way. They need to give their microbes in the gut a chance to get used to the new food. So that's one thing I see out there that's like totally misunderstood. I don't know. Did that answer the question?
Oh, absolutely. I really appreciate you going through the history because giving us really a snapshot of our food history and our evolution as we go from hunter-gatherer to essentially, as you said, staying in one place and farming. Everything changes. The diet changes. The body changes. In a weird way, humanity has been going through this ongoing nutritional genetic experiment, i.e., hey, let's stop hunting and gathering, and now let's stay in one place. Let's grow grains. Let's farm animals. Let's take their milk. Let's eat their meat and see what happens. And as
we're still here. 10,000 years later, we're still around because nature is amazing at helping us survive. And so so of course, no one knew anything about the microbiome. As a matter of fact, I was the first person, I was trying to find answers as I was so sick. And I honestly believe that if you have a good heart and you want to find answers for yourself, but you also want to help the rest of the world, the universe shows up and helps you find answers. So doors would open, information would start to come together. I'd start putting, being able to synthesize different pieces of information. And I, began studying. I don't even know what made me start going in this direction, but I remember studying, trying to find information from microbiologists. And I saw that they had all these journals and reporting information in their journals, but that was it. They reported something and it didn't go any further. And I thought, well, this information should be out here on our side of the fence. And, then when I started working with children with autism, it really got me thinking okay, so first of all, when I put the book out, what was that, 28 years ago at least, believe it or not, it's been out that long. It's still amazingly accurate. Again, because I was trying to write this book, and every time I thought, well, I'm almost done, this whole new information would come into my life, and I'd have to follow that track, and finally it was done. And then it spread around the world on its own, amazingly, and helped a lot of people. But it was, so I had systemic candidiasis, and I didn't know that's what was wrong with me until I met Dr. Crook, and he'd written the Yeast Connection, and I thought, that's it. I have that classic history, antibiotics for years. then I took birth control, very strong versions back in those days, because that's what they came out with. And so I have candidiasis, I have all the symptoms. And his book was a start, his diet was a start in the right direction, but it wasn't quite there. And I fortunately had up to this point a lot of training. And so I thought, I'm just going to find what does work. And that's what Body Ecology became. So it was out for quite a while. I don't exactly remember, about 17 years or so, so maybe 10 years it was out. Children with autism started showing up in the world, and I have a degree in child development, a master's from Loyola in counseling, and I've always had this thought in the back of my mind for sure that I was here to do something that would influence the world. And I remember when I was 7, my father died, and I was having these conversations with God thinking, well, who's going to teach me how to do this now? So there's something I have to do. So I get really frustrated at different times of my life thinking, well, when am I going to get to do this thing? But now looking back, I realize I was always in training for it. But, so these kids have autism, and I'm thinking, go to a conference and I find out they have yeast infections, they have gut dysbiosis, it's affecting their brain and so on. So I found out what was wrong with them, and I thought, I think I can help. So as the universe would help, a group of moms came together with me. I pulled a group of moms together, and there was just 6 at first, but it grew to thousands of families in our Yahoo group who were getting their kids well, and they hadn't gotten well ever yet to this point. But that's when in those early days, I was asking this question, why autism? Where does it come from? And how does this inner ecosystem, well, I had been answering this question for a while, but how does this inner ecosystem get started in us? And then I realized it actually happens at birth. So I started putting all that information together. It didn't exist yet. And so kids started getting well. So that was even more validation. By this time, thousands of people around the world, tens of thousands, were on the Body Ecology Diet. But then the paleo, so the Body Ecology Diet was gluten-free, casein-free, and definitely sugar-free. Because I'd go down to these conferences, upstairs there'd be these talks going on with literally 1,000 parents in the room, and many, many doctors coming to see, how to get the kids well. And you go downstairs to where all the exhibits are, and all the stuff was, they were breads and cookies and pancake mixes and things like that, all with bad stuff in them, bad oils, sugar, lots of sugar. So I thought, these kids will never get well. And that's when I pulled Bedrock together. Body Ecology Diet Recovering Our Kids is what the moms called themselves. So so we had really good success with that, and fermented foods were a critical part of their recovery. At that time, I had people started drinking coconut water, and it was incredibly sweet. And so I thought to ferment it, and then by the time, so many people were starting to drink that and having great, great results. More beautiful skin, women having periods that were so clean. It clearly had an effect on the liver and people's joints. Again, liver, skin, eyes, vision. People would say their vision's gotten so much better. So by the time the kids came along, I just introduced it to them, and it had an amazing effect. It was easy to hide, and even some junky juice they were drinking, and then it began to change their behavior, and they could start to speak and all. But what was really going on that I, of course, didn't understand yet was that this gut-brain connection. So you fix the gut, you give somebody a healthier gut, which is much easier to do. The moms were feeding their kids right, hell-bent on getting their kids well, sharing information with each other all over the world. Our moms had a real humbleness about them. I always felt that they felt responsible and felt that they also had to be the ones who got their kids well. And there was they're helping each other. It really was an amazing time. So kids started recovering, and then the word spread out all over, and even all the doctors started changing how they were. Well, they knew what to focus on then, and testing the kids and seeing how they were doing. So it was a real group effort. Like the doctors in the early days, they, maybe even now, they their own children had autism, and they worked with the parents. They wanted the parents to be in partnership, which was kind of unusual for doctors up to that point. They just told you what to do, and you're supposed to go home and behave and do it. But this is a whole different world evolving. So today, sadly, it used to be 1 in 80 boys, and now today it's 1 in 40 boys. So we haven't solved the word did not get out enough to people. And I used to think, how come? They should be lining up at our door here. And then I came to believe that you almost have to be spiritually qualified to have these answers. I mean, this is my belief. People that are meant to get well because they're good people and they're well-intentioned and they're humble and they find their way to the answers to get well. So, and our moms were really special people. They, as I said before, they didn't feel like they were victims. They were just going to do what they had to do. And that was a lot of work sometimes, where other mothers would say, oh, I just can't do that. It's too much trouble. He won't eat broccoli. So this isn't going to work, this kind of thing. So, but many, many children recovered, and that was a really good time. I got frustrated eventually talking at conferences like Autism and One, because I was trying to bring another message into the world, and that message is autism is very easily preventable. But nobody, except for one wonderful doctor down in Florida, it's like nobody would listen. Of course, if you already have a child with autism, maybe, you're the wrong group to talk to, but even any other time, people just didn't catch on to it. So that's too bad, because it's very preventable. I still stand by that today, and we have proof of that today, years later. So that was like another phase, of my life that I went to. But over the years that have gone by, paleo has come out, which is basically just body ecology. And some people believe in fermented bulletproof diet as body ecology, but without the fermented foods. But, everything that came out that was working was a version of us. Keto, same thing. It's just like more healthy fats. Because to me, it's ultimately that, particularly fats, is very personalized. So you have to personalize your diet and add a little more of this, a little more of that based on the condition that you have and blood type. And let's see. Well, it's just, you got to personalize things. You can't just all be eating exactly the same way. So personalization is kind of where we've evolved to. And of course, our understanding of the microbiome, and now it's just like nothing is not connected to, for sure, brain health. And I would like to say something a little bit more about that, so I hope I can remember. But for skin, beautiful skin, like I'm a person that the doctor told me, you have bad genes, you're always going to have terrible pockmarked face and oily skin. But that didn't happen. And so sometimes I remember that and I think, oh my gosh, my skin is really good. I'm 75 years old. I don't have some little bitty wrinkles here, and that's about it. And but see, your gut, I'm very focused on eating for a healthy gut. But also aging well. You're going to age much, much better with these healthy microbes inside of you, because they're preventing DNA damage. They're helping keep your cells cleaner. I mean, that's why we age. Our genes become weaker and weaker and become more damaged. Our cells become more toxic and kind of give up the fight. The bacteria, these healthy microbes in your gut, and there's not just bacteria, there's other great things in there too. They're all working together. Sometimes they're not working together. Most of the time they're competing with each other. But it's a very fascinating world. And back in the beginning, I used to say, look, there's this world here. We're going out and spending all this money in space, looking under the ocean and whatever, but there's a world in our gut. And for the longest time, it's just like, certain people seem to get it. And then all of a sudden, around 2012 maybe, all of a sudden this magazine, very popular magazine, Psychology Today, or maybe, I don't know, but they started printing things about this world in our gut, and the word microbiome was invented, because I always called it the inner ecosystem up to that part. I didn't know to call it microbiome. Now it's very, very, it's like everyone's talking about it. I always say, it used to be only I sang that song, and now everybody in the world is singing that same song. But we know so much more about it. It's the hottest area in research, and there's not a single organ in your body that isn't being harmed by an unhealthy gut and the poisons that the bad bacteria produce, or helped and protected by the microbes in our gut. So the more I think people understand the body, then it gets us back to looking at that world. And then what does it really boil down to? The more you look at that world, it really boils down to what we eat, stress, sleeping well. So, the microbes change. They change at different times of our life, but they even change at night. When we're, of course, the diet changes them. If you're pregnant, it changes through the different trimesters of pregnancy. It's changing when you're breastfeeding. It's changing to produce the milk to feed the baby as the baby gets to 6 months and 12 months and 2 years. All of that is really, really orchestrated by the bacteria in our gut. And so if you want to add grains back into your diet, prepare them properly, eat them with fermented vegetables. Don't overeat, and then don't overeat on them. Like another one of our 7 principles is the principle of 80-20. So you want to have 80% of vegetables, and then 20% would be the grains. So ideal is like a porridge, which is what our ancestors would have eaten. They would have this big pot over a fire, put in some grains, they had to spread them out so they wouldn't have put a bunch in, and any kind of herbs and vegetables that they could put in, even bones and things like that, which are fine too. And they would have cooked them for a long time, maybe all day long, and they would be easy to digest. And so I don't understand why we're not teaching people these kind of things.
Well, it seems like our world is so fast moving. Fast food isn't just about how fast they make it. It's how fast you eat it. It's how fast you finish it.
True.
It's how fast you just get through the whole experience. And we just have so many rich foods. We have so many intense foods. I think we live in a day and age where we seem to require so much stimulation, or stimulation constantly comes at us from a very young age. We're being stimulated by intense television, intense shows, intense music, intense videos. There's a lot coming at us.
And stress kills microbes in your gut.
Most people don't realize that it's actually, I found a study, it was done back in the 70s in Russia. And this is way back when I was doing research just at the University of Massachusetts Medical School Library, where Russian fighter pilots, they somehow figured out that when the pilots went out on a very stressful ride and did something that was, brought them to the edge and almost killed them, when they come back and test their gut bacteria, that one stressful event can dramatically wipe out their gut bacteria.
Yeah, like an antibiotic too.
Just like an antibiotic.
People are always undergoing stress, and it's chronic. And I don't think they realize that little children today, they have usually stress from the beginning. They're put into school early. A lot of demands are made on them. When I was growing up, because I was born in 46, so that's the very first year of the baby boomers, and our parents had just come back from the war, and they wanted their kids to be raised better. This generation is considered kind of raised promiscuously, but the truth of the matter is you went outside and they didn't care when you got back. Just come home in time for dinner. So, nobody was really stressing us. We were out there playing and probably I was doing ridiculously dangerous things sometimes when I look back, but, we all survived. And, but the other bad side of that, we also weren't watched so carefully, and we weren't necessarily guided. I wish now that somebody had noticed there were some special qualities in me and helped me kind of get on a path sooner. But, and I think that's a big mistake that we're making with our children right now, is we don't see a purpose in them. And I think we're all here with a purpose. All these children are. And if you can help them start to find out what that purpose is, it's a wonderful gift to give your child growing up. It's really helpful to feel like you're here for a purpose. So it's almost like a time now when parents are righteously fearful of their child's safety. Kids pick that up. Also, there's lots of research showing what happens to the brain of the mother when she's stressed out during pregnancy. The back of the brain becomes larger. The front of the brain, which is the prefrontal cortex, which has to do with organization skills and logical thinking and all that, that's a little bit smaller. This is the part of the brain that develops when we think outside of the womb. It's probably a dangerous world. So some children grow up that way too. Maybe that's true of all the African American children that are raised in the projects, and so it gives them a more warlike, mentality or brain. But so one of the things I think people have to do, which is why your work is so important, Marc, is that we have to change our mindset. Like, we grow up with beliefs, of course, as you know, and if you're gonna change your diet, for example, your way of life, you're gonna have to evaluate what are your beliefs? What mindset do you have about diet at the moment? Do you think that healthy foods don't taste good? Because that's really wrong. Do you think that they're expensive or hard to find, or you don't know how to prepare them, or whatever your belief is? That needs to be changed first and foremost before you can really move forward and start to make those changes in your life too. So a lot of those, of course, come from stuff we picked up from our parents or beliefs we formed as children. But I do see, I'm always wondering, how come everybody's not taking care of themselves? It's not that hard to eat well, and it doesn't have to be expensive. A lot of money is being spent on junk. That's what raises your food bills every month. Why are we not looking at this pandemic and saying, that spread all over the world, and notice that America has the most deaths by far? Why would that be? Is it has something to do with the way we eat? Does it have something to do with our obesity? Why do they not tell us, look, lose weight, eat better, build your immune system? By the way, that's the other major function of your gut. It is your strength of your immune system. So I really might have had COVID. I do remember a period there of a couple of weeks where I seemed to be kind of having something and not pulling out of it quickly. And, but, it hadn't gotten too popular yet and people weren't talking about it. But then anytime after that, I started feeling like maybe I was susceptible to it or had some symptoms, I would just schedule with this wonderful doctor here in town, and I got IV ozone, where they radiate your blood and put it, take your blood out. It's radiated and ozone is put with it and it goes back in. That kills infections immediately. So I probably had it. I probably have antibodies to it, but it's never been a threat to me. And I know that I have a lot of tools, but other people don't know those tools. So that's ridiculous, if you ask me too. So, but I hope that, I think a lot of people woke up. They are real concerned about their health, and that's a great place to be, because I so well remember how nobody cared. And it's so frustrating when you talk to people and they not only know nothing, but they don't want to know anything about their health. So that always amazes me, but I think it's completely because of that mindset that they have, like, well, it is expensive, or I don't know how to do it, or whatever.
So many people, I think we get caught up in immediate gratification. We want what we want when we want it. So I feel bad, I'm stressed, I'm anxious because of anything going on in my life. So I want something to take me out of it. It's usually something pleasurable. That often can mean food. That often can mean something sweet or something sugary or something carbohydrate-y. I'm wondering, have you noticed a connection between, people who crave, in particular, people who either crave sweets or crave other forms of carbohydrates? Have you noticed a connection between gut health and cravings in that way?
There's tons of research on that. And so we don't have usually good bacteria in our gut. You can tell if you're constipated, you can tell if your stool has a bad smell to it and so on, ammonia-like smell. There's a lot of toxins that end up down in our gut, but the bad bacteria make toxins called lipopolysaccharides. They want to stay alive, like everything on the earth does. And so they change their environment, they change the chemistry of your body, of your blood, to make you feed them. And I keep thinking I need to look up the details on this, but I think it's like a cat or a rat or something that this bacteria, this parasite invades their brain. And then I think the way the story goes, it just stays there and lets the cat eat the rat or something like that. Like it's no longer able to protect itself because they very much have control over our brain. I should go back and look that up. People can look it up if they want to. But, so they control us. They control our brain, of course. There's a lot of information on that. And they do it to stay alive. So you have to shift the environment of the gut, change the environment, remove the pathogens. That's the theory of the 4 R's. I think, it's just really 3 R's is enough. You need to remove what's toxic in your gut. I happen to be a big believer in enemas. I don't think people should get constipated and not go to the bathroom for a couple of days when they can do at least a lower bowel enema where they just rinse out what they would have eliminated. And even if they're pregnant, I find that it's perfectly safe, and lots of women that I've guided do that. Because as soon as you're toxic, you are auto-intoxic. You're making yourself even more toxic, your baby toxic if you're pregnant. So that's really, that's part of remove. Of course, you want to remove the bad foods that you're eating that are contributing to the toxins in your gut and so on. And then you want to repair the gut lining. There's things to do that. I mean, honestly, even drinking some aloe vera juice is something super simple to do. And then you want to start to add in your beneficial bacteria. So restore a healthy inner ecosystem. You won't be able to do step 3 until you've cleaned out the gut and changed the environment for the good guys to live there. Then you have to feed them, of course. And that's where you do want some fiber, healthy fibers like vegetables. Foods with vegetables have fiber in them. So that's going to help, feed those bacteria, prebiotics to help them grow. And it's a process, it's not something that, okay, I'm going to do it this week. I want to be there in 4 weeks. It's not going to work like that. The gut's very long. There's a small intestine and large intestine. They're both very long organs. So it really takes time, and people should think in terms of a year or so to change the environment of their gut and restore a healthier world. We have a product that I really have come to love, and it's called EcoPhage. So phages are viruses that live in the gut. There's lots and lots of phages in the world. We talk about bacteria all the time, but for every single bacteria on the planet, there are 10 phages. So they are viruses that will go and kill a bacteria that's bad, a pathogenic bacteria. Now, the one we have is called EcoPhage. It's 4 actually phages that kill E. coli. So E. coli is normally present in a healthy gut, but in small numbers. And so I just found the research that all the millions of people around the world taking metformin. Metformin grows E. coli out of balance. If you have SIBO, there's a really excellent chance, 85% chance that the bacteria that's causing the problem in the small intestine for small enterobacterial overgrowth is E. coli. So start taking these phages, just swallow 3 twice a day for a while. Here's what they do. They go and find the phages find the E. coli. They attach to it, and then they inject this thing that like a needle into the E. coli. And then they steal some of its DNA and they start making more of themselves. So now inside this cell, this E. coli cell, is a bunch of phages. So many that they blow up that cell. the E. coli, they blow it up. And now there's tons of, there's a ton of phages out in the bloodstream looking everywhere they can for more E. coli to kill. And we really need to, think in terms of this type of therapy too for bacterial infections in the lungs, for example, for pneumonia, the bacteria that would cause pneumonia or the bacteria that would cause maybe sinus infections. Phages do that. And our government has suppressed the use of phages in this country. They were starting to get popular a long time ago, and now people forget about them. But this one's particularly important because, I take it every single day because you never know when your E. coli, and you're going to eat some vegetables with E. coli, salad or something, raw salad, or you never know when your E. coli is going to mutate. They mutate very easily. So this is just like having a police force on guard. If they don't have any E. coli to kill, they don't kill the good bacteria. But so anyway, the world has advanced to rather an extraordinary time, and there's so much help out today, and there's so many people out in the world helping functional medicine doctors that are getting educated. So it's if you're going to be sick, it's a good time to be sick.
How do you, let me set this question up. I've noticed that over the years, and I read up on these things, I try to stay current, and it sometimes blows my mind how many products are out there in the probiotic universe. Mm-hmm. And I have to imagine for the average person who just walks into a well-stocked health food store because they read an article or listened to a podcast and heard about gut health and heard about a healthy microbiome, and they want to take a probiotic, and you're faced with a plethora of choices. I know you're a big proponent of fermented foods. How would you advise people, how would you advise listeners to sort of begin their gut health journey relative to products?
Okay. So, sorry.
That's a big question too. I understand.
Well, no, it's an easy answer. So, we have a one of the 7 principles of body ecology is step by step. So anytime you want to do something, you have your first step. So in that case, to answer your question, what would be your first step? Well, if you walk into a health food store and somebody's got a whole shelf full of probiotics, that's not where you start. You have to, first of all, start to change the environment of the gut. So you've already got to commit to changing how you're eating. By the way, I didn't mention this, but the gut bacteria have an enormous effect on depression. I used to be a very depressed person. I didn't even know I was. It's just that people would say, "What's wrong?" And I'd think, nothing really. But if I looked in the mirror, I looked really unhappy. And but even that has changed in me because I'm just sort of consistently always positive and happy. So it's because of course I eat this way. But okay, so getting back to the step-by-step principle, so you don't start there by taking a bunch of stuff. That's not the right time. So you want to change your diet and get rid of the bad things you're doing and change the environment of your gut. One of the things that we sell, 2 things. Okay, so let's say the first step in changing your environment would be to eat some fermented vegetables. Well, back in the early days of body ecology, you had to make them. But now you can go to the store, and there's a lot of companies that make some very good products. So just, pick them. If you want to pick the ones with beets, I like the beet ones because beets are actually very high in oxalic acid, like oxalates. But you ferment things and you get rid of the oxalates. But then the beets have all this good, like nitric oxide, which strengthens the immune system, good for the heart and all. Now you get the benefits of the beets. So that might be a good first one for you. Let's say they're too sour and you don't like the taste. We'll put some olive oil or pumpkin seed oil and some salt on them and eat them that way. They're much milder if you do that. And anyway, so that's what I would do. And then another product we have called Energy Body, Cocoa Body. That's a great place to start. Just 3 ounces with your meal. It's going to help you digest the meal. You're putting really good bacteria in your gut as that food moves through your body. But what's important about both of those, which they both have this, they have an extraordinary diversity. And I think supplements have their place. We sell some, bifidus, for example, is super fragile, usually not in people's guts. It's a good one to a group of bifidus is a good one to add, but these ones with these acidophilus, they have so many benefits, and they're very strong, very hardy, where bifidus isn't. Start with the diversity and what I call the wisdom of nature, because man put the supplements together and in a lab and so on. But if you take cabbage, carrots, garlic, ginger, they were growing in the field, and every single head of cabbage, every single carrot, piece of garlic, whatever, they had their own little microbiome on them. Incredible little world on that little piece of garlic, that bulb of garlic or that carrot. And nature created that carrot's protected by that world that's on it. So you bring it in the kitchen, you shred it up, you pack it in a jar, create a brine of water, and I like for people to put starter in, which of course you can get from us, but sea salt, and I like to use Kelty salt, and I even put in minerals because they love these humic minerals. So I put all that together in a brine, pour that over the vegetables, toss it together, pack it in a jar real tight, and just wait and let nature take over. So all those different microbes, like you can't say, well, this batch of fermented vegetables have these microbes. So we have our fermented liquids come from Australia. We bring them over in a refrigerated boat and refrigerate them immediately. But they have an incredible diversity because they're made out of quinoa and millet and biodynamic brown rice and chickpea that have all had their own little. Every piece of quinoa had its own inner ecosystem. So now you're taking extraordinary diversity and putting it together, growing a culture, and now you're drinking it. So there's no way man can duplicate that. And it is one thing quite well known is that the diversity is the secret to a healthy gut. So that's how you get diversity. But actually, the more I know, the more I find that you don't really have to do that much. I know it looks confusing to people and overwhelming. I would feel that way too if I was just starting. But so much, you benefit so much by fixing your gut and eating right, including depression. Oh, and one thing I wanted to say too, Mark, is of psychology of eating disorders. Over the years, we've had a lot of people say they had bulimia and different types of eating disorders, but on the diet it went away. But I didn't know why in the beginning, but now I know why, because the yeast. Okay, so one of the things, so we all have infections in our body, and most people have yeast infections. It's really overlooked. Like doctors see them on the organic acid tests and so on. They see it so commonly, they just kind of throw it out. But it's for about 50 years, we've been passing more our yeast infections onto our babies who grow up and have their children, and then they have yeast. It becomes the infection that the woman has in her body becomes really acute during pregnancy, because when progesterone and estrogen goes up, she's feeding the yeast, so they become more acute. She's passing that on to a baby. So we really try to explain to our mothers who've been on the diet how important it is at the very beginning of life to set that healthy inner ecosystem into place right away, so that the immune system throws off this infection and it's not ever a problem. But a lot of people grow up with yeast infections, and the yeast absolutely cause eating disorders. So that's what was happening in the early days. As people would go on the diet, they'd say, wow, I don't have all these crazy cravings anymore. So anyway, there's a connection. So conquering infections is a really critical thing to do too. And again, that gets back to diet and having that healthy gut to build a strong immune system.
So it sounds like at the end you've been sort of simplifying a path through a lot of the confusion here. You talked about the 3 R's, you've talked about fermented foods. Anything else that you want to share to help people just kind of cut through just confusion in general about food, nutrition, health?
Well, I have something called the 4 R's in Body Ecology. So there are these are the 4 things you need to focus on to get well. First, you've got to create energy. And, that's a big problem for people. I see them often in a hole, and they can't climb out of the hole to get enough energy to get well. So if you're a practitioner or not, you want to look at your energy and what is draining your energy. Infections, of course, do, but a lot of times, just like you said, we're watching TV, being too much stimulated by things like, Instagram or whatever, and really bad news. Even that is draining our energy. But, if you work with a good functional medicine doctor, change your diet. I think clean your colon is really important. That's amazing how much energy that's. Like, you wake up in the morning, you're toxic, you have no energy. Somebody will do an enema, jump in the shower, go to work. They have tons of energy. So we are trying to get energy by drinking coffee and doing other things that, stimulate dopamine. But getting a good night's sleep is priceless. So if you're having sleep problems, you got to figure out why. Why am I having sleep problems and what tools can I use? A little bit of melatonin. Sometimes I'll wake up in the night and I can just tell I'm tense inside. So I've got CBD and kava that I can just take a dropper full, and next thing you know, it's morning. So I have my tools. So we have to, we all need to have things like that. Hormone imbalance is a big reason why women particularly don't sleep. So you need to go get your hormones tested, work with someone who knows what they're doing, and go on bioidentical hormones, which are very safe if you test and find the right dose for you. So you've got to correct your energy. And then then you want to start conquering infections because they're sucking up your energy. And it could be viral infections. Most likely there's Epstein-Barr involved. It could be Lyme disease. But, that's really important to do that and conquer those infections and the inflammation that comes with it. You have to get that under control. And then, of course, you have to correct digestion, which is, again, starting with diet, adding the fermented foods. A lot of people will say, well, I have a histamine intolerance. I know fermented foods are on the avoid list. But like the way we make our fermented vegetables, we add extra lactobacillus plantarum. Plantarum degrades histamine, so it's absolutely what you want to eat. And also another thing, if you're a coffee drinker with your meal, coffee suppresses that enzyme that degrades. It's supposed to be degrading the histamine, but it's not now. So, fix things like that. A good functional medicine practitioner should be able to help you with that. And then that's create energy, conquer infections and the inflammation, fix the gut, correct digestion, and then the last thing is focus on cleansing. I think the top of the list tool for cleansing is our colonics and enemas, going to a good colon therapist. And as you start to detoxify, because the yeast are dying, for example, and you start having this feeling yucky, do an enema or a couple. And notice that, okay, you're over that spell. That's something that we even did in our bedrock group. The kids would start detoxifying. They'd have days on the sofa feeling like they had a flu. But our mothers knew that after that, they were going to do something good was going to happen. Like they'd start speaking or they'd stop playing their video games all the time and talking, being present, eating better. But we knew that. And so moms would get all excited if their child looked like they were getting sick. But it made me feel sorry for the kids. So I started telling them, I said, well, why don't you do enemas with your kids? And of course, some thought I was nuts. Some immediately did it and reported back to the group that this horrible stuff came out of their little 3-year-old. Well, it's not that it was stored in there. It's just that they're making very toxic material. They're rinsing it out. The child feels so much better. It's like putting them on an escalator so they're getting to the airport gate faster. They would come up with their enema bucket and ask their mothers to do an enema. They felt so much better. So they're great tools. I'm not talking about coffee enemas. These are cleansing enemas. So you're actually using more water, rinsing out the material that's ready to come out. You can do an implant after that if you want. An implant, some bifidus, say, or even aloe vera for healing the gut lining. But I don't know that it's even necessary because there's good healthy food up in the small intestine and hopefully good healthy bacteria up there moving on down into the colon. So, that's just a great tool. So cleansing is the last C. So correct digestion, cleanse, correct digestion, conquer those infections, and most of all, create energy first and foremost.
Donna, what a great conversation. Really, I so appreciate your breadth of knowledge, and I can speak to you for hours, and I am just so appreciate you, so appreciate your work. Why don't you share with us where we can find you, where we can find resources?
Well, just go to bodyecology.com and sign up for the email list. I feel like we put out excellent informational articles. We do have really good products. I'm actually usually bad about telling about our products. I don't want to sound like a salesperson, but I've put a lot of time into learning what we need and really putting out products that we need, particularly gut health products. Yes. And so I would like for people to try them and use them and get well. I mean, especially my real heart is in our children because they're absolutely in trouble. The human race is in trouble. And if you really think about it, you could end all of that in a generation or so if we just realized how important it was to feed our mothers well during pregnancy, start the baby's life with a healthy inner ecosystem, feed them well, let them have healthy children that think really well. They're peacemakers. Our children, body ecology children, are always gifted. They're always intelligent. They're way ahead of the game as far as development, but they usually have an area, at least one area that they're gifted in, or something about them that's special. But they're most of all happy kids from the minute they're born. They don't get colic, they bond well, they're smiling, and the world smiles back at them, and they have things just, how like a happy person is going to manifest more in their life. That's the potential of every child on this planet.
Yes. Thank you for saying that. I will be a brief salesperson for your products. What I truly love about your product line, and I use them, I love the Probiotic. I've even used the what's the other liquid that you have?
Oh yeah, Energy Biotic. Yeah, that's my favorite.
Yes, I love those. Really, really great. Your products are, and I say this as a compliment, fanatic. You really pay attention to the ingredients. Even your green powder, it's fermented, so it's sort of pre-digested, has other great, ingredients in it. So I really appreciate that your product line is not just what I would call another Me Too product line. Like people just want to get into selling things because everybody else is selling it. You're creating products that are more cutting edge. And so thank you for doing that. So I encourage listeners to definitely go to bodyecology.com. Donna, thanks so much. So great to spend time with you.
Oh, ditto, Mark. But also thank you for saying that and promoting our products. I want people to get well, and I know our products can help. So I think it's hard to find your way to a good company today because there is so much confusion out there. So this is really important, special to me that you invited me to be on. I know your focus is more on psychology of eating, but there's really a tie-in here. So yes. I hope it helps people. Thank you.
Thanks for all the wisdom that you've shared. And thanks everybody for tuning in. Take care, my friends.
Hey friends, we're so happy that you've joined us for another episode of The Psychology of Eating with Marc David. Are you loving these episodes? Then simply subscribe and you'll never miss an episode again. We'd also love it if you'd leave us a comment below so we can hear more about your own journey with food and body. And if you're curious about what we offer at the Institute for the Psychology of Eating, including our internationally acclaimed coach certification training that's rooted in dynamic eating psychology and mind-body nutrition, please head on over to our website, psychologyofeating.com. Until next time, take care. And remember, having the body you want starts with loving the body you have.